Welcome back to Highway Through Health. We're not a crisis line, we're not a therapy show, and we're not licensed healthcare providers. What we are is a place where lived experience is taken seriously because too many people have discovered the more clearly they speak, the worse they're treated. We share personal experience not to give medical advice, but so that when people encounter the kinds of situations we discuss, they're ready to recognize patterns and respond effectively. This show is about language, power, and what happens when systems stop listening and start translating people into problems. If you've ever felt misheard, mislabeled, or punished for staying coherent under pressure, you're in the right place. Good. All
Yeah, I have
right.
my notebook. I made sure I brought extra notes today, but I have to have a notebook.
Yeah, it's really tough. I was I'm getting back into finish up, excuse me, or trying to finish up TLP4, where this is really all focused on the kidnapping, how that happened, the follow on, all the problems afterwards, takes it from the beginning to the end through the court system, and kind of adds in how that kind of a system built itself. And it's just, you can go on and on and on because it's never ended. I mean, Nuremberg did nothing effectively when
Right.
it comes to the medical industry. And and I hate to say it, but we just saw it played out in this big thing that we just lost. And I think that's really starting to hit people who have this notion that we can always coerce somebody into doing something that we think is good for us, and look at all the terms that were used in the beginning. We're going to bring you freedom, we're going to do this for you, on top of, threats to crush entire societies. When you look at the language, the lingo, how it was put into action, blowing up girls' schools, and you're thinking, where does it's really not hard to see where it comes from. And when you look at the psych industry in particular, it's really easy to see how that mentality has built up over the years. Well, look what happened at the global war on terror. Who did they pluck when they wanted to start torturing people? The APA. The APA went along with it. There was a
Yeah.
lot of back and forth. This is the Psychological Association. Now, this had all kinds of people associated with it, doctors. They don't explicitly say psychiatrists, but it's almost impossible for me to believe that the other half of the APA wasn't involved in this just
Oh
as
yeah.
much as the two psychologists who devised the torture program. Because this is all about what you learned from POW interrogations, what you learn from
Yeah.
assaulting people with those drugs that leave them incoherent, the shocking. We don't even know what happened in the black sites, but you can read what happened in the sites that weren't black sites. And if that doesn't turn your stomach, then I don't think you have any humanity left in you. You certainly don't aren't a believer in universal rights, and you definitely don't have an understanding of what motivates people who are on the other side of a fence sometimes, that you've not experienced. So, yeah, you do need notes. It's almost
Yeah.
impossible to do this without it because I do the best I can to remember as much as I can, but really, man, there's a whole bunch that I miss. I know I do.
Yeah. Well, I think
But
too. This is why
so we,
I'm glad, and I believe it's definitely by God's divine plan that I grew up just around Edgewood. I mean, I wasn't more than 15, 20 minutes away from Edgewood. And now, what
yep,
I know, certainly since seeing that documentary, because that really covered it really, really well, in addition to knowing what my Native American heritage is, in addition to knowing what my family story was, both the side that I'm blood related to and also the side that was just purely adopted because that's an immigration story on their part, and very poor. And my grandmother on that side, who I was actually close to, her birthday would have been yesterday actually.
Wow.
She was an Irish Catholic orphan, and was brought to this country at the age of like 5 or 6, very young, by the church. And ended up, because, and those orphanages were horrible. She really went through some
Oh yeah.
things. And then ended up marrying a man who abused her terribly. She worked as one of the first telephone operators, actually, so she had a real important job. Certainly
Nice.
one of the first ones working like for transatlantic and overseas and things like that. But
Mm.
he gambled, he beat her terribly, drank all the time, beat the kids. She tried to divorce him in during the Depression, and I mean that was definitely frowned upon. Had to remarry him because as a woman with 4 young children, she had no place else to go.
Oh,
So
they'll take
there,
them
that's
away
when
from
I
you back then.
that's it. And there was just no that trauma just builds. And that's why I say I understand a lot about intergenerational trauma. And I think, and again, I know that we plan our lives with God prior to incarnating, with each incarnation, and I can really see how certain things have been constructed. And now I'm very grateful because the amount of fraud, the things that I went through were the same types of things that you would see for interrogations. They were literally trying to break me. And then do
Hmm.
the rebuild like they did with the psychic driving. And bear in mind, the butcher that was in charge of all this torture studied at McGill, where of course they did a lot of these things with the MK Ultra and then re-imported it back to Hopkins, and of course they were doing the same things at Edgewood. So the only thing that ever happened was all of that fraudulent psych stuff, all that abusive nonsense and profiteering and fraudulence just got re-imported and taken up by
Right.
Hopkins. And I've seen the paperwork that they were doing MK Ultra, so I've seen the actual paperwork, and I know this, and then I see confirmation that, well, also everybody's medical records were sold during the pandemic. BlackRock, I believe, bought Iron Mountain, and that's where everyone's medical records were stored. So when I hear people say, "Oh my God, there's all this stuff on my," I'm like, yeah, between the hacks on these stupid computer storage things and the fact that everybody's actual records were destroyed. Shit, I've got the boxes that I have that I got from, of all places, the homeless shelter that I store a lot of my books in, say Iron Mountain right on them. So they used to hold people's
Yeah.
medical records at one time. So I've taken one and I wrote a Y at the end of it. So it says Irony Mountain because I'm storing my books in there. And I'm like, yeah, y'all thought you were getting away with something slick and you didn't. um and
Well,
but I feel like, to me, just to know what, to have a personal story, to be able to trace all the fraud and fraudulence, to be able to name names, because this was a multi-state identity theft, fraud, traffic, and torturing ring. I, just by being honest, just by trying to do the right thing, uh and not wanting money, because I've told those lawyers a couple times, and the reason they didn't want me, because I'm not going to shut up about it. I want this stopped. I don't want money. You can't
right.
pay me much money. I want this exposed. I want it stopped for the good of everybody, for all humanity,
And if you're not
period.
going to sign an NDA, they're not going to work with you.
That's it. And they know that I'm very serious about this, because yes, I don't like it, but I want to take what it is that I've been through and turn it into something positive. I want to turn it into something that means something, for something that's actually healing, that stops this
Hmm.
fraud. If they just took all that money that they've been recovering from this fraud and this behavioral health, all the SNAP fraud that's being perpetrated by the people in charge, because it isn't the people that actually need help. We need help. It's the people in charge that are
Hmm.
perpetrating this, and that's who they need to
Right.
go after. And you put that money and give it to her, and also get REITs out of here. All this real estate investment trust, get it out, get it out. It does no good. It's money from Russia and China, and I'm horrified by just how much land and property they actually own here in the U.S. That nobody who actually lives in it or on it owns anything anymore. I'm horrified by that. If we just took that fraud money, actually reinvested it in Americans, in actually buying American property back, we would be doing so much good. We would actually have an extraordinarily strong economy. Get the big harm
Oh,
bullshits out of here. That's all insider trading. That's all a lot of smoke and mirrors. That's all going back to the WEF. And there's another factor within all this, too. This is how it's happened for several decades. The literal son of a Nazi is running the World Economic Forum. So you have all these
hmm?
oligarchs from all over the world doing things on a very shady basis, hiding it behind these corrupt corporations, and they've thus far been somewhat getting away with it. But here's the positive about the pandemic: it's really allowing for a lot of this to be seen. So that really, they're going way too far. And again, God isn't going to allow for all this to continue. This has just been way too much. And that's why we had the
Yep.
spiritual awakening.
Well, they were
So,
definitely,
yeah,
yeah, because the frog was definitely being boiled, right? Well on its way to being boiled with all this stuff. And I think when you look at the just knee-jerk suppression of civil rights when it comes to the bike industry, that's pretty much
yeah.
evidence of it. That predated,
Oh,
that
yeah,
actually facilitated the COVID
that's it.
abuses
That's it.
because who
That's it.
paved the road for that? Well, it's the psych industry that did it. They've been
Yeah,
used to harming people for generations and getting away with it, and then billing everybody,
that's it.
obscenely for it. But I think to your points, you're right. I mean, even the psych industry saying things like, "Oh, your trauma comes from your childhood." No, you got to go back that 5 generations. You got to go way back
Yeah,
and look at what all
that's
has
it.
been handed down from. If you're not looking 5 generations back, you're not looking. And if you're going
That's
to
it.
think it's all in your
That's it.
from your childhood forward, you're going to be blaming all the wrong people, and you're never going to realize you won't see the patterns, the big
That's
circular
it.
patterns that come around and go around,
That's it.
and you'll miss out on how some of those fear shame cycles work and the intergenerational thing, fragments. So yeah,
Yeah,
looking at it like that, you planned it before you got here is kind of a way, especially when you know that you have one of those immersive spiritual experiences, is something that is a possibility. It's a very real possibility that numerous people have experienced. And if you start thinking the way I did anyway, was okay, I know that's possible, and I know the practice that provokes it, and I know the stability that I need in order to get through it when it happens. That's a whole practice. That brings in entirely different kinds of emotions that I never even knew existed. So, what we're trying to advocate here for, I think, goes way, way, way beyond us just sitting here complaining about this
yeah,
stuff. Because really, what we're seeing from our side, and certainly from my side, um, business wise, competitiveness wise, from just a society that's functional instead of a bunch of hoarders that are, at each other's throats trying to,
yeah.
steal whatever scrap they can have to
That's
feel
it.
better than the next guy. It's kind of what we've created off the backs of this control freak mentality that is pretty evident when you just look at what's going on around us right now.
Well, we have too
So,
that they've been misusing the past life regression hypnotherapy. They've been
sure.
misusing it. And that's a problem right there in and of itself. So that had to be cut off at the knees too. And I knew it happened to me, and I
Mhm.
knew already that people knew what my backstory was. And I knew that they were trying to circumvent me moving on and moving forward. They were just trying to abuse my own consciousness out of me in order to try and attempt this consciousness transfer. Like I
Mhm.
said, I got pictures of me dead on my phone. I've heard about this. So this is stuff that, and this was something that Epstein was very heavily invested in as well. So we also have those things within the Epstein files. And that's some of what people don't want out there, is just how heavily involved he was, and on a money situation. So we don't just have the other horrors going on. It's the horrors of trafficking people and profiteering off people's pain and breaking people in a variety of ways. They
Yes.
were misusing all this. So
Learning how to control, manipulate, yep, at a
that's
very
it.
deep, visceral
That's it.
level, and then using breaking that up into fragments, but spreading it out through society to where it still has an effect, keeps people divided, keeps
Yeah.
them pecking at each other,
Yeah.
all the things
Right.
that we don't need, all the counterproductive stuff.
Yes, exactly. They want to make people as hollow, shallow, manipulative,
Right.
nasty, and selfish and ego driven as they are, and that's just not going to happen. And they're finding out that there is a major pushback
Mm-mm.
on that because people are just not that way. Not everybody is out to get others, and the ones that think that way have gotten really certainly in the 80s we saw a lot of this, but it's gilded age stuff. There is certainly nothing new under the sun. This has been happening in civilizations. It's why
No.
other civilizations have fallen. And at this point, we've seen it often
Hmm.
enough that somebody's got to throw the spanner in the works. And this is here we have again the spiritual awakening coming into this. So it
Right.
really is Jesus coming back within each of us. I certainly think that properly used, ethically and morally followed up past life regression hypnotherapy can be a major part of what's going to help people come around to these spiritual experiences,
Hmm.
to have a higher consciousness. Same thing with the reintroduction of plant medicine given in the right hands. I really
Right.
feel that that's going to help people reform actual communities, really be again on that vibration, raising the vibration and having a very natural communication. All the things that they were trying to circumvent, things that Tesla had brought out, things that Rockefeller wanted to try and prevent, uh, from actually happening and being brought forth into, because Tesla had no interest in profiteering, but everything that he did was taken up by JP Morgan Chase, Rockefeller, all these folks who tried to obfuscate it all. But we're seeing that info return anyway. We're seeing it get out
Hmm.
there, and we're seeing people who have that interest in let's just make things fair. Let's
Right.
actually make things, be what they're supposed to be, what Jesus had talked about with morals and ethics and being based upon soul, being based upon actual
Right.
sentiment, not egotistical anymore. I think we're moving past
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
I do too. And down here too, I think I'm seeing a little bit of shifts here and there in some of the churches, and so you're hearing more functional language coming out of people. So that's a good sign too. So the performative, yell and
Yes.
scream kind of stuff falling away, and people starting to realize, wait a minute, there really is more of a functional approach to there's a lot of utility in the kind of practices that what you and I are talking about. We've learned them, but we we just coped with what was handed to us. And as you said, I've had some dreams that remind me that I knew what I was getting into before I got here, and so I don't complain when things get really really tough. It's just shut up and deal with it. You ask for it, and
Yeah.
move on. I know what the job is. I know what we got to do. So let's just get up every day and keep swinging at it
Yeah.
and make sure it happens or give it our best shot anyway.
Yeah.
So, and I did notice today, a good thing probably, the Supreme Court ruled that marijuana smokers don't need to lose their Second Amendment rights. So that's going to be
Good.
struck off of the,
Very
which is
good.
really another
Very good.
eugenics kind of a thing
Yes.
because, most pot smokers can't find their guns, much less want to shoot alcohol that we're that. I don't think we're going to lose anything from except a whole bunch of hypocrisy. It's we see little breakthroughs here, little breakthroughs there, and
Yeah.
I'm really hoping the outcome of this recent disaster is going to be more that we learn that okay, we need to start changing the way we think because the way we think is playing out in ways that are really terrible and they're
Yeah.
not doing us any good, and we're making ourselves dumb. All this, like we said last week, becoming a nation of bullshit artists mean you become a nation of people that are not competent. That's the problem. When,
Yeah.
you give up healthy, rigorous debate, which, sometimes people can't stand that because it hurts their feelings. But when you're putting garbage out like $14 million pond that keeps turning green, well, it's going to in the middle of summer when the sun's beating down on it, you're not refreshing it. I mean, algae has a known growth rate. You know what happens when the water hits a certain temperature? It's pretty not terribly hard to figure out. It ain't
Yeah.
gonna stay blue.
Well, God, back
So,
in
what?
yeah, back in Baltimore, we'd have fish kills, and the stench from those algae blooms. Oh my God, it was odoriferous. It just permeated everything.
Mhm.
It was very much competing with the smell from the sewage treatment plant, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah,
It's saying a lot.
yeah. But we've literally arrived at a point where people just check their brains at the door and go with whatever the group herd mentality says, just the go along to get along thing, truth be damned, and let's move on. And that's really it kills people's souls when they got to go into an environment like that to work. That
Yeah,
um when you're managed by a person that doesn't really have, you just don't even understand how they comprehend the world sometimes.
yeah,
And when you see that layer going up and up and up like that, and just as a big money skimming thing, when it really gets down to it, we've got a lot of things upside down, and those
yeah.
upside down things are hurting us. So we'll keep working at it, and I know that's my motivation for the whole thing
Yeah.
right now.
I think we've had far too many people who have fallen into this very egotistical. They're more interested in being right than learning something. They're just more
Hmm.
interested in, they don't ever want to have they don't approach things with the idea that life is complex and there's always more to learn, and to be able to approach something with the idea of, let me learn from this. It doesn't mean you don't have boundaries. It just means to be able to be a little bit more open minded and approach things with a much more a willingness to understand, as opposed to coming to it from an ego standpoint. And I
Right.
think that that's just it's a shame, but when you have people who are very materialistic, very shallow, very surface, everything has to be, I have to be better than you somehow. Well, better in which way, and better than what
Hmm.
exactly? That whole competitive
Yeah,
idea
exactly.
of the, of the I versus we, because there needs to be much more of a realization that we each as individuals are pieces of God. We each have something important to say. Our experiences do matter.
Mhm.
We are all here for a reason. Let's just try to enhance one another's experience. Let's just try to be at least the light in dark places for one another. Let's try to
Right.
approach things with some understanding, and the idea every day, how can I make the world a better place? How can I bring something to today that actually is pleasing to God, is pleasing, that can help
Hmm.
somebody else? How can I do that? What is the best way that I can be of service? And to be
Right.
able to approach life with that viewpoint, with that idea, with that attitude, makes such a huge difference. And I
Does.
think being able to be an example of that, and to be able to, hopefully, knock wood, inspire people to do otherwise, to do likewise. Um, that matters to me. When I went from somebody who literally couldn't walk, and never thought I'd even be able to sit comfortably
Right.
again, let
Yeah,
alone
I know
walk.
that feeling. That's
Yeah. And to me, it's like,
yeah.
I want that to be celebrated, and the fact that people trying to sabotage that, I'm devastated by that, but
Hmm.
at least I'm no longer around those folks, and now I have an opportunity to expose them, and say, listen, this
Yeah.
is actually satanic. This is what's happening. This should not be happening. And how many other people is this happening to? Because it's got to be quite a few, and there's less of those
Oh,
type
yeah.
of things than there are of people like you and I. There's, so we're
Yeah,
seeing
I
that
mean,
just because it's been a power imbalance doesn't mean it's going to stay that way.
Right. I look at Elizabeth's situation, Elizabeth Hofer's situation, what she's going through right now,
Yeah.
and just quick one, she survives on SSI. She was taken into this foster system at a relatively young age, polydrug through her teen years, didn't really get a chance to get a full-time job for any appreciable point of time,
Mm.
continue with that. Basically, as we talk about this system that we have today is more of a reinforcer of learned helplessness,
Yes.
strip people of purpose and replace that with pills. Went
Yes.
over that
Yes.
extensively. And what we've done, we have created these people who, I mean, we could easily make a society where a person like Elizabeth can find the kind of employment she needs to at least pay her bills, live decently, right? But we've chosen not to do that. It's almost like we have this zoo of people of an underclass that we want to make sure that for whatever reason they stay there and not get out. And then we have a lot of people making a lot of money off of that. So here we have a
Oh,
woman
yes.
who's 42 years old who really needs a lot of coaching in terms of life coaching and getting, motivated and also help getting to and from places. But more than anything else, what she needs is a community. But
Yes.
right now, she's being evicted from her corporate housing
Oh,
and she doesn't, she does that. She has to take a third of that and pay her rent. So, okay, there's $333. So, how many of the rest of people out there are going to make it on $666, a month? Because that's what she's left with after she pays her rent, which I don't think that includes her utilities. I mean, you're talking car, taxes, insurance.
yeah.
We know what it's like, right? You live in this country without a car, you don't really live in this country unless you're in certain places that you can walk or
Thank
get
God.
to bus where you get,
Yeah.
public transportation is strong. Those places are few and far between. And when you're a person that's dealing with disabilities and you don't have that and you have to use your own car, or you got to get a driver,
Right.
that's another expense. That's $30 just to go to the grocery store, which is,
Yes.
5% of your income basically, just for the month, just to go back and forth to one place. So, you know, I know we can do way, way better than this,
Absolutely.
but man, between the drug infrastructure that's built up around her, which costs several times the $1,000 a month that she's, handed out from the government,
Right.
or I get that the faith community is busy, but at the same time, this is a constant problem. I mean, helping a person find purpose is what the faith community is supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And when someone's missing that and it's crushing their lives and making, I mean, I just can't believe that there isn't something out there that someone knows of that something could help her. And I can't believe that with all the money that we spend on these systems, it's just so dead. You don't get an answer.
Well,
She
see,
doesn't get
it,
answers. It's
to
no.
me, here again is where there needs to be a real meeting of the minds and an overhaul of all this fraud. As they are
Hmm.
finding this fraud money, how it should be applied. A number one, okay, great. I'm glad that the deprescribing is happening. It needs to happen. Get away from all that. Get that shit out of there. And the courts stop forcing people to be electrocuted. Stop forcing
Oh
people
yeah.
to be poisoned. These are literal poisons. What the
The
high holy hell is going on here? It is eugenics, and
right.
they need to be called out on
It
that.
is.
And once they get that out of there, and once that money can then be applied, have a bridge built between people doing the spiritual work, the faith community, and then, like I say, there could be malls that could be purchased and repurposed for people who are older, disabled, for the autistic community,
Oh
even just for people who
yeah.
are trying to heal from all of this, people who want to remain sober, who are trying to get back on their feet after years of being damaged
Hmm.
by either these neurotoxic poisons or from the things on the street. It's easier to actually recover from street drugs than it is these neurotoxic
Yeah.
poisons, and they are literal poisons. So again, all of this
Hmm.
needs to be discussed. We need to get the grown-ups in the room to sit down, discuss how this money can be much better applied as opposed to a bunch of lawyers in a room having a circle jerk. I'm so tired of this because
Right.
nothing ever gets solved or resolved, and it needs to happen. And we need to have, and this is why I'm so glad that we have Laura from Inner Compass Initiative. Angie Peacock does a wonderful job speaking up on behalf of veterans and what she's been through in the
Hmm.
VA. And of course we have Mind Freedom and CCHR. So we do have a lot of people out there. So now it's time for us to be able to combine our voices, combine the visions that we have. Dr. Roger McFillin is awesome, and I'm glad that he's actually spoken with Inner Compass Initiative.
Hmm.
And here's where I think that building that bridge, as he's working on Radically Genuine, I
Right.
definitely, we also see Metabolic Mind. So we have Chris Palmer, whose book Brain Energy I have sitting right over here. So there's just a multi-layered approach that can be done much cheaper, far more effectively, where you'd have actual outcomes. Get some Soteria
Right.
houses built. Invest money in the communities so that people like Elizabeth, other people who have, whether it's physical disability, whether it's, whatever it may be, or people like yourself and myself too that have lupus, and folks from the autistic community, so that we can get together and start having actual community building,
Right.
and have that make a difference, because we can all understand that we've come out of some damage, and we can all understand that we've come out of some serious harm, and truly abuse and torture, literal torture in my case, and I think that goes across
Hmm.
for a lot of other people. Again, thank you, Jesus. Not everybody's had the extremes I've had. I don't want to see anybody else have any variation on what it was I had lived through, any at all.
Absolutely.
Nobody needs that.
Yep.
And that to me is what's important. And I feel every day like it really energizes me, and I consider, this is how things need to be rebuilt. And I've made it very known that it's like, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. I would love to be able to work with Bobby Kennedy on this. I think this is something that can absolutely be done. I think it can be done fairly quickly. I feel like there are a lot of really good ideas. We just need to be able to pull together, because as they're recovering the money from all this fraud and fraudulence, the resources are definitely there. And to be able
Right.
to combine some of the ideas that he's had about, building things near farms and all, that's brilliant. I think being able to have people appreciate the food and the whole food to table thing. Again, I want to see money being invested in Native American communities too, and the old recipes and the food trucks and the ways of growing things and the ways of respecting
Right.
the land, and how to hunt and use the entire animal. I think as we are sort of going to be able to bring some of this indigenous respect and ways of living back into what modern day is, I think we'll be able to see a whole lot more respect for the earth, respect for one another, and really living according to God's plan. I feel like it's something that can easily bring people together, and we can have a return to a much saner, healthier world, without
Right.
all of these fraudulent labels, these eugenic slurs, all this forced drugging. We're going to take the violence way down once we get that crap out of there, and we're going
Hmm.
to have all these false narratives get out of here. It's far
Yeah.
past time that needs to stop. It needs to stop.
I think a lot of the problem is we've a lot of the protest agencies out there have still had to tolerate these people because I think you and I really have been outspoken in how we're going to start not tolerating these people
Right.
because we shouldn't be tolerating these people. It's the
No.
tolerance that's killing us when it comes to the improvements that need to be made in this field. And you have to just get in and break eggs sometimes. And it may sound rough when you hear it in the beginning, but we wouldn't be speaking like this if we didn't really have a reason to do it. I mean, I don't like go around just irritating people for the sake of irritating people.
Right.
I'd rather work constructively with
Yes.
people, but when you're constantly being picked at and you have to defend yourself and you don't know if you're going into your next doctor's appointment, if someone's not going to slap a label on you and go, oh, we got a place for you and it's not here. I mean, that's kind of stuff happens to people
Yes, it does.
and not necessarily people that are, you know, in real bad shape emotionally. So, there's just a lot of money out there being directed in all the wrong directions. It's not going towards empowerment. It's going to
Right.
reinforce learned helplessness. It's going to reinforce the purposes in the pill. Uh, life where people are just plopped in front of televisions and drugged until they drool. And, that's the solution. And it doesn't matter that that's the solution that they think is a solution. Anyway, it's applied across the board. Just keep piling them on. The most infuriating part of my kidnapping was how my rights, I was having coherent conversations with them. It's all in my records. But because they were listening to rumors, not me, they picked the validity of rumors and
Right.
just put me through hell. And they didn't care.
Yeah.
Like, what? Where is this coming from? How did we get here? How did we really get? And then just and the obscenity of it all when you really look at what really happened versus the way they tried to present it
Yeah.
and do it in a threatening way. So yeah, we've really got a lot of toxicity built into this. I mean, what it is, it's evidence of the toxicity that we have allowed to build up in our society because we just and we're not talking about going out and hurting people. What we're saying is going out and confront it. I mean, if
Yeah.
that's what I do. If there's something that's not
That's
truthful, I'm going to
right.
confront it. If you're trying to shove that in my life, I'm going to tell you, no, I'm not accepting it. I don't take it. This is why. And there isn't any kind of confrontation. Let's keep pushing it.
Yeah.
That's when,
That's what I kept doing. I kept saying, I don't want to be here. Can you help
Mhm.
me move to someplace affordable? But they were too interested in their false narratives, their human experimentation, and keeping up their fraud. They had already stolen my identity. I didn't realize I'd already been sold, but it wouldn't have stopped me from standing up for myself. And then I thought, you know what? Thank you, God, for just making me somebody who is honest, who's not greedy, who only has an interest in moving on in life, having
right.
my own, having some space of my own, trying, because I was already trying to figure out how can I do this and keep applying it to my life to make my life as healthy as possible, get away from
Hmm.
all those toxic drugs and away from those toxic people. And
Exactly.
and I'm glad that I had actually called the cops and sat down with a couple of them who, by the way, they didn't even give me reports. And I thought this is strange. So I knew it was very odd then and there. But I'm glad they had the cameras on because one woman I spoke to for a good 90 plus minutes and explained everything. I named names, I showed her paperwork, the whole nine. And then
Right.
another time when I found fraud on my paperwork, I made the phone call to OIG and which is Office of Inspector General. I called Medicare again about the fraud, all of this, and I had the paperwork right in front of me that they had charged for, two injections that I was refusing. And I'm like, why is this even on my bill? And so
Right.
there I had, and I had already reported that guy to the nursing board, supposedly. And now I read supposedly he's also a doctor. Either way,
Right.
he's from Nigeria and he's part of a money laundering ring. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
And
Amazing how
then,
many of the psych people come from cultures that are totally foreign to what we're used to. So the words, inflections, everything means something probably completely different.
well, and they have the ability to money launder because they do it through their own countries.
Oh yeah.
So that's what's so attractive to that. That's just fraudulence. And I didn't realize the extent or the magnitude of what I had uncovered. But then once I started to, then I really kept leaning on into it. And like I say, I reported to all the authorities and everything else. So, and
Hmm.
since I had been trying to do that and report these folks to the FBI since at least 2022, and I think even a little prior to that, um, now I know why the FBI doesn't want to take my call, but I also think too, at one time, it seems to me that perhaps because like I said, the person that was misusing the hypnotherapy, he didn't like what he did. He didn't like what I know he was being forced to participate in.
Hmm.
And at some point it was like I had thought that I was being given this new identity and stuff. But now what I tend to think happened was, since we went all the way, because they future progress you as well as regress you. That's part of
Right.
what happens with that. Now I do think that I was going to be able to be free. And I, knowing myself well enough, the fact that I would have said, listen, I want this shit to stop. So I know that I would have agreed to walk through the fire of hell, just for the purpose of bringing heaven on earth.
Right.
And I don't say that from an egotistical way. I say it from a very realistic spiritual awakening viewpoint.
Right.
Um,
Because
you
look
know,
at all the stigma that has to be dispelled. That doesn't happen when people stay silent. It doesn't happen when
right.
people, shy
That's
away
it.
from the experiences. It doesn't happen when people don't defend the experiences. It happens when more and more people go out and seize those moments, have those experiences, and then have the guts and the integrity to go back and say, look, I may not have all the answers, but I know what was real. And I think that's what we've done is saying these pieces are extremely real. Now you can call them what you want. You're free to do that, but you're not free to do that in a courtroom. Not anymore. That's what really has
No.
to change. This stuff needs to be
Yes.
completely thrown out of courtrooms
Yeah.
because it is really just aggressive eugenics and this notion that they have a right to experiment on people just because they may be disabled or sick or whatever. And keep going once you've clearly, repeatedly, over and over again told them, no, leave me alone.
Mhm.
You know, where did this come from? And to charge the amount of money that they charge for doing this, the $300 billion a year, that used to be our defense budget when I
Right.
remember it back when it was rational, not $1.5 trillion. So the amount of money that's being thrown at these behavioral health, which is really, eugenics extended, which is
That's it.
really how can we manipulate you, not so much how can we liberate you, because nothing about any of that has anything to do with spiritual liberation, which is the kind of stuff you and I talk about. So, what are we doing? Why are we throwing all this money at this system that comes back and just bites us? It's like we're feeding the snakes that are
Yeah.
eating.
It's Action T4 updated for the modern day. That's
Hmm.
all it is. It's Action
Yeah,
T4 in the computer era. And it's the same exact playbook. It's about changing medical records. It's about hiding the truth. So really, what happened with the pandemic was being able to really put that out there in a much larger way, and then think they were going to hide and duck and dodge and everything else. Well, you can't do
right.
that. People do see what's been happening, and it's been happening. And then drugging children and experimenting on children, that's just really it's mind-blowing just how far low these folks have gotten. And it is low. It's low.
Eh, Yeah, I mean, stick a needle in everything. That's the
Yeah.
solution. And
Yeah.
it's like, it's the same thing when we're talking about, mass spraying corn, with Roundup.
Right.
And I probably shouldn't use that word, but glyphosate, I'll say it that way, as we
Yeah.
do that and pretend to, no, I can't hurt anything, and making plants that are immune to glyphosate so, they can be sprayed directly and, I
Yeah.
there's a lot of other ways to control this stuff. We ate well before glyphosate came on the market.
Mhm.
I can understand weed issues, but I've also seen some really neat innovations in China where they're using lasers to comb through the fields and blast weeds with laser beams and UV light instead of letting them. or using pesticides. So we have all kinds of things at our disposal that we could start putting into use to start reeling some of this stuff backwards. And the economic benefit from doing that is probably a whole lot more than, continuing to funnel a whole bunch of money at a chemical company that isn't very responsive to customer feedback. Certainly, the psych industry's version of that is not responsive at all to customer feedback. I mean, tapering that we'll be talking about here soon is a great example of that. And virtually every evolution of the psych industry has been because of survivors. It has not been because of the evolution of the industry. I mean,
Right.
if once lobotomies were banned, there was a very concerted effort to bring those back. People
Oh,
were
yeah.
pushing for lobotomies. I think it was Bregan who was talking about one of the first things that he did as a psychiatrist was push back against the people who were trying to reintroduce lobotomies, right at the cusp of 1969, 1970. So
Mhm.
this mentality is in these people. It's grown. It's been indoctrinated. Blow off the Nuremberg Code, make it seem irrelevant, relabel, stigmatize, do whatever we got to do to, build this supremacist network that allows us to assault people in whatever way we want to assault them. And that's really what it is. Then we call it
Mhm.
medicine on top of all that. And I I just can't see any sense in any of it right now. I have a real hard time. I
No.
know there's a handful of people out there that have some skills in doing this, that, or the other thing. I know that some of it has been very helpful for certain people, but I think overall we're dealing with an incredibly toxic industry that is never going to evolve in the way of certainly not a pro-consumer, pro-freedom, pro-spiritual liberation sense. That's something that we're going to have to go and fight for, unfortunately, to take back because they have already stolen it. Ridiculing spiritual experiences is a very common thing for them to do in courtrooms. I have personal transcripts that testify to that. I've heard a
Mhm.
number of people within the Common Rebellion site and some of the other people who have mentioned, they were held for praying over the Sacred Heart of Jesus or the blood of Jesus over somebody, to help them out. And so that is become a knee-jerk part of that industry, and we fund it. We're forced to fund it. Forced to fund it.
And that's again where I think by you and I and other like-minded people being able to build something that's separate, that's far more cost effective, that we can prove has actual outcomes that are positive,
Right.
productive. It's going to make a huge difference. And the fact that they are still electrocuting people, like I said, when I saw that the butcher that was in charge of the stuff that happened to me, and like I had mentioned, my heart stopped in 2023. I was
Hmm.
ready to go. Instead of them doing that, they forced ECT on me against my very clearly and well known stated will and wishes. So they were definitely experimenting on me
Oh
because
yeah.
this butcher also had studied stuff about the heart. One of the places they kept sending me was already in trouble for putting stents in people without permission and other stuff. So I'm furious about that, but I'm glad that I saw it. I'm glad that it's out there, and I'm glad that I can stick up for myself and have reported this butcher repeatedly. I'm
Right.
glad that even though I had sent a letter to Maryland Board of Physicians, okay, they didn't do anything at that time, but probably because she is also licensed in at least two other states, being New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Uh, and she's probably getting taken down because, at least right now in Maryland, it says temporarily closed. And I thought I aim to make that permanent. She's a
Yeah,
butcher
right.
and she had no business doing to me what was being done. She was the one who was in charge when I had my face beat to shit, was colluding with a known domestic abuser, a crook, a criminal, a fraud, who I wanted to leave and didn't want to
Hmm.
acknowledge it. And I came to a neurology and they were studying the whole consciousness thing. So I know that was at Hopkins, and like I said, she deserves not only to lose her licensure, but I kiss it up to God what else happens. But she is a butcher that is just as bad as any Nazi who was over there in Germany and
Yeah.
in the concentration camp. She is just as culpable, just as bad, and this was intentional. And even Mr. X said, "Can you prove intent?" I can, and I am, and I'll continue to do so. So,
They've been that's it's really what we said. The NDAs have protected this industry for way too long.
yeah.
And really they've had the benefit of the doubt handed to them on a silver platter, if not,
Mhm.
constantly whipped up. So they're I think there's a lot that's going to be a lot easier to prove. And the other thing is when you're talking about civil lawsuits, the way it should be, you don't have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. You just have to prove by preponderance of the evidence. And
Yes.
so by preponderance of the evidence, I think it's pretty easy to show that, the modalities, the training, the circular way of the condemnation that they keep throwing, the dismissiveness, how they would, you know, for me, in my experience, cutting back my painkillers, denying the fact I had lupus, they took over my medication, so I was on no lupus drugs, but I was on blood thinners, and then forced me on something that's going to drive my blood pressure through the roof. I mean, this was like a clown show of
Yeah.
people sitting around, oh, let's put you on the for no reason
I
other
know.
than they can get away with it and bill for it. It certainly didn't help my health. It was completely detrimental to my health.
Same.
I've never emerged from a situation with an absolute hatred of the people that did that, but I certainly did from this experience, and that goes from the hospital, well, from the person that threw me under the bus to begin with, then from the hospital all the way to the kidnapping, and finally 21 days later
Yeah.
getting out of the whole thing.
Right.
And I'm really lucky that I didn't get damaged a lot worse by that experience.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because I was not gonna deny what happened to me, and I knew that that was not a place to talk about what happened to me. That was the worst place to talk about it. And I was clear, I don't talk to kidnappers. Don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, but j I just wish the average person would understand how much contemptuousness this industry has for them, just in its core operations. And this is something that we've allowed to happen. We've allowed it to get this way. Judges have rubber stamped it. They've encouraged it because there's no pushback whatsoever on the legal side of the fence. These aren't trials. These are jokes.
Yeah.
They're not, they
That's
shouldn't
what
even
all
be
paid
called a
for.
trial. Yeah.
They're all paid for. They're all on Big Harma's payroll. That's
Hmm.
all it is. It's very lucrative. This is a lucrative fraud because they know that they can just run roughshod over everybody, do eugenics, and line their pockets with
Hmm.
blood money. They all need to be prosecuted under RICO statutes because they are breaking the law 6 ways to Sunday, and it
Yeah.
is evil. It's evil, and it is eugenics, and they know it's Action T4, and they know that this is all done under cloak of LLCs and corrupt corporations. Well, it's time that this gravy train's brought to a complete screeching halt. This is more
Yeah.
than enough. They are liars, they are crooks, they are criminals, and they are perpetrating billions in fraud. Billions.
Hmm.
And that just should not be on any level. That needs to be going back into the economy and literally rebuilding an economy that actually helps Americans
Yeah.
and average Americans, Main Street, working class, what used to be the middle class. Stop it with this nonsense. Oligarchs don't need anymore. We have a corrupt corporate oligarchy that's been pulling the strings behind the scenes for far, far too long.
Hmm.
That's enough. That's enough of these Wall Street elites and globalists. That's enough. That's enough.
Seems to me we have two aspects of healthcare. One of them is a functional. It's like when you really get hurt and somebody returns you back to health again. or if you have a heart attack and someone goes and puts a stent in or does a bypass or something like that and gets someone back out and moving again. Then you got this whole non-productive aspect of healthcare, of which behavioral health, psych, is that they produce nothing. Even by their own records, they don't really produce a good outcome for the vast majority of people that they
Not at
see.
all.
So you start going, well, why is there so much coercion then in a non-productive aspect of healthcare like
Yeah.
psych? Why would that even be there in the first place? I mean, the going in expectation should be we have no idea what we're doing, and we might be able to help you, we might not. Do you want to talk to us or do you not? And when someone says no, that means leave them alone. And
Yeah.
who in their right mind is going to talk to a kidnapper? It's like, come and tell me everything that's going on. It's like, wait a minute, you're kidnapping here, which means you already have a prejudiced attitude against anything that I'm going to tell you, number one. So I can't have a rational conversation with you because I'm kidnapped. And another thing is, I've lived my disease 20 years now, but back when I was kidnapped, it was 7, and I had gone through 3.5 years of absolute hell that there's no way I could recount what that was like in a few hours, 20
Right.
hours, 30. I wouldn't, and I didn't even have a desire to do it, and it was none of their fucking business to begin with, right? that's
Hmm.
that's an area where when you're told to shut up and back off, you shut up and back off, because I'm not going to sit and be demeaned and made fun of, which is exactly what ended up happening when you do try and talk to these people. So um yeah, you wonder if they're not returning people back to health, and they're not don't have a way to cure people. Why are we throwing excessive amounts of money into it? And on top of it, they pay themselves more than a typical medical specialty would. Some of them pay themselves more than cardiologists. Certainly the ones that were I know at Pine Rest at one point they gave themselves an $800,000 payout one year. I know there was probably some kind of a bonus, I'm sure that they
Right.
whatever, but
Right.
they were taking in 300, 400 plus $500,000 a year. This is
Right.
obscene,
There's body
absolutely
brokering.
obscene. And they're
Yeah.
preying on disabled people who are forced to live in pretty much poverty. So
Right.
what is we have two levels of welfare recipients here. We have the zoo that's kept in this place that, they're going to be miserable, they're going to be in conflict with their neighbors, they're not going to have purpose, they're going to be kept in, a place where they can't get a car. It's really struggling, and good luck
Mhm.
finding a job given your problems and whatnot, and not being given any help for it. And then you have this highly paid class on top of them, which sit around and make a fortune doing nothing for them, or making sure that that's the kind of life that they're going to live, right? And
Right.
who's on
And there's
welfare
body
here?
brokering,
Yeah,
the body brokering, and there's no incentive for people to get better because why? Because then they lose their lucrative jobs.
right.
Jobs. It's fraud. And even RFK Jr. had mentioned this. I don't know, it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, where he was talking about there's these places that supposedly addiction treatment centers that know that when people go out and they relapse, they get just paid twice. So they need to start being
Mhm.
able to prove that they're actually doing something. And that again is part and parcel of what we're talking about, what I believe to be I know a major part of those neurotoxins is the fact they deplete your dopamine, which is a number one cruel and unusual punishment anyway. How dare you
Right.
do that to somebody? And for another thing, if you're giving that to somebody who is already prone to using drugs or alcohol, do you know what that's going to do? It's going to drive them straight back to the drug of their choice. That's what exponentially rises ODs because nobody can feel any pleasure. So they go right back to the fentanyl, they go right back to the alcohol, they go right back to the cocaine. And I know because I've known
Mhm.
people that I've lost because of this shit. And it's enough of that. Just stop
Right.
it. Stop it already. It
Right.
is just nonsense. It is fraud. It is hurtful. It is iatrogenic harm. It causes
Hmm.
cancer. These drugs cause tardive dyskinesia, all this other stuff, metabolic disorders that are just insane. Why are you forcing people to take poison. Why are you forcing people to take carcinogens if it's not for your profit margin? Because it sure as hell doesn't help anybody at all,
Right.
even a little bit. And that's the truth they need to be confronted with. And that's what I kept telling them. And I'm going to keep
Mm-hmm.
saying it. And I want these folks to actually have to, have to respond to that because it's a fact. It's a known fact,
Yeah.
you know?
And I've had some people directly say to me, "Well, those drugs really help me." I had a conversation last weekend with a person that went on for about a little over an hour, maybe almost an hour and a half, and this person told me that they had taken drugs and it helped them. And I'm like, "Well, yeah, and you've not been exposed to any other alternative other than that."
Right. That's it.
So
That's it.
when you
Plant
limit
medicine
the
and other things.
yeah, and so it might, but the other things that are going on, and I think when we get into the tapering, we're going to get into the very real problem that people have been stuck on these drugs that don't work, then they get addicted to these drugs that don't work, then getting off of them is a problem, and they still have never addressed the underlying things that got them there in the first
There you
place.
go.
So it's
Right.
almost like a compounded problem that they have. So you're dealing with a double problem as a person has become so neuroplastic about their learned helplessness that they can't get out of it right now. And that's a very real danger when you get stuck
Yeah.
into this circular thinking that the psych industry
Yes.
produces,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So
Yeah.
anyway, oh, we've
It's
about
been
done our
fun,
hour
huh?
again.
Wow.
Time has flown.
That goes quick, man. That
It
goes
does,
real
doesn't
quick.
it?
It
Well,
does. Oh,
we
happy,
gotta
I want to
talk
say
later.
happy Father's Day to you. So I hope you
Oh,
enjoy
thank
the
you very
weekend and I
much.
hope you
Appreciate that.
have a really good one. Yeah.
I'm gonna give it a shot. We're gonna run into Asheville and we're gonna go to a Brazilian steakhouse. So that's gonna be fun.
Oh,
I'm gonna do
that
that.
sounds
And I'll call
nice.
my kids who both live out of state. Yep. And hopefully have at least a couple minutes to talk. So
Good.
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. You're
All
welcome.
right. Till next week.
All righty.
Thank you once again for your
Thank
time.
you.
Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure,
Hey, we'll
hon.
see you soon.
All right. God bless. Take
Same
care.
here. Bye bye. You
Bye.
too. See ya.